Hi there, folks. Welcome to Thursday afternoon's live Q&A session with me, Al, here at HQ down in Cornwall. It's another Xone session today, so let's get me branding up a little minute. There you go. You can all ask about the merch again. Today, I'm hoping to just have a little chat, maybe answer some questions if you've got some, to talk about levels, gain, meters, things like that on our DJ mixers. Just show you over here. Got a little setup using the 96. So you can see my channel meters, you can see my main meters. And the idea here is to just walk through a couple of things that we all here probably consider best practice, something we do without really thinking about it. We see comments and stuff coming into our support crew and generally around the internet where I think people using the DJ mixers are perhaps making some assumptions or perhaps don't understand quite what some of the controls do or how best to set them up. So the reason that it's gain, levels and metering is so that we can talk about, let me switch again here, your gain stage for the mixer on the input, which is this control here. On most of them, they're generally called gain. Some of our mixers, it's a trim control. There's a little difference between the two there. Your faders, obviously, for the channel, which on all of our Xone mixers at the top of the travel is unity gain, which is the same signal coming out of the channel as is going into it. The metering we've got on the channels there. I'll just give you, there is some metering you can see. I've got a few different sources coming in on the mix here. And then obviously the master meters over this side. Now if I turn this signal up, for example, you can see that hopefully, and then turn that up there, you can see on the master. And you also might notice, any keen-eyed of you out there, there's a slight discrepancy on those 2 meters. We'll talk about that later. The other thing that I just bring to your attention, so that you can see my point of reference, something hopefully you're all familiar with, is in all of our user guides for the DJ products, and it's this page here, which talks about operating range. Maxime, Sonoga, hi guys. Anybody else out there who wants some questions and wants me to clarify anything I'm talking about or got some questions, pop them in the comments and we'll get back to you on those whilst I'm talking. This picture here, and hopefully you can see my little hand, is in all of the user guides, and it talks about the operating range, where your music level should be in relation to your meters and dB. If you haven't seen it, download your user guide. It's at the back. So you kind of read everything about a mixer before you get to this stage, or you can just flip straight to it and have a look. We talk a lot about our dynamic range, signal to noise ratio, headroom, clipping, peaking. Listen, there might be a few guys on the Allen and Heath channel who are just saying, why is he going on about this? We know all about that. We're professional sound engineers. We do this every day. Guys, this isn't a session for you. This is for our DJ users who aren't necessarily technical engineers and have come to it like a lot of us DJs, just kind of learning as we go along. So I'll just go through a bit of a glossary, if you like. The operating range in relation to this image and our meters, if you like, down here, and I'll talk a bit with the mixer as well in a second, is how loud and how quiet the signal can be, between it being turned down very, very quietly and it turned flat out. And what we often see and what all sorts of people will argue about is driving the channels hot or running it in the red, peaking your meters and stuff like that. So all the way down here, really, really quiet. We're looking at minus 80 dB. You won't hear that. You won't see it in the meters either. but there is stuff happening in the mixer. That's kind of electronics going on down there. You won't hear it. It's not a problem. It's just what it does, because these are analog mixers we're talking about. Moving up this scale, dBu, round about minus 30 is where our metering on the DJ mixer starts coming in. Okay, so when you turn your audio on, it's around about this level where you'll start to see the signal being metered. And if you have a look at this graph, we want it, and we tell you when you're setting up the mixer to adjust your gain stage so that the levels are operating between minus 6 dB and plus 6 dB. This is generally considered to be the optimal levels for your audio signals. Audio signals, we are talking stereo, dynamic music, and obviously with the DJ stuff, there's a reasonable amount of bass content in there, and they're very dynamic, transient audio sources usually. Within this range is kind of generally where you want stuff happening. If I show you just quickly with the mixer, I think I can switch to here. Bear with me a moment. This is a test tone signal. In here, I am just going to put on this channel an old LP. There you go. You should be able to see that there, coming in on channel 4. That's a vinyl LP. It's some soul music. So I know we've got a lot of house and soul DJs out there. It's a bit of Al Green, actually. You don't need to hear the audio. But as you can see, gain here is what we see typically a lot of users doing, is setting it to a center position and then just moving on, turning up the channels, getting into the mix. On this audio source, it's not really even reaching 0. If I cue it so you can see it on both of the meters, you'll see for this track, the peaks in this audio is just getting around into lighting the blue LEDs. So the record is pressed fairly quietly. What am I going to do about that? This is why I want to talk to you about gain. How to set the gain is with this control, and it's an adjustable control. It's adjustable for a reason, because when the audio is a little bit quieter like that, see if I can do it so I can show you. Bear with me. Let's have a look. I can turn it up a little bit. There you go. Turn that up a little bit. Keep turning it up. I'm going to keep turning it up until I've got my cued levels. There we go. I want that to be reasonably loud in the club. That is where we're talking to you about the nominal operating range. So this signal coming into this channel, before I turn up the fader, is around about a level where I want it to be, so that when I turn up the mixer and that signal goes out to the amps, the audio driving the speakers is got the full best content of the music, and also has the least noise, the best what we call signal to noise ratio. There you go. I'll show you that again there. I'm just going to take my record off because the other one I've got lined up is a different sort of record, which will give quite a different signal level. And let me just demonstrate that now as well. I shall go back to show you the mixer. I've set this back to the center detemp position again, and I'm referencing a lot of you users we see out there just kind of set that control to the middle and then kind of mixing. And let me just drop this. This is a 10-inch record. I call it a dub plate. It's cut a lot hotter. There you go. Straight away, when I play that tune, already my meters are where you saw I had to adjust that for the old vinyl LP. That's completely normal. I would expect a 10-inch recent dub plate cut to be reasonably hot like that. I wouldn't expect an LP from the 70s to be cut like that. So I would expect to have to move this control one way or another to balance this level before I start mixing it. Okay, so setting your gain, generally speaking, best practice is what we're talking about here. Start with the gain off, the minimum, and then you might have heard people say, get a loud track, get a quiet track, depends what your audio sources are. Turn this up. Have a look at the meters. Wherever that is, dependent on the source. Now, see there, if I move that away, I'm already a little bit before the 12 o'clock position, and that's touching 0 dB. I move it up a little bit further. Again, depends where I am in the track, depends the content of the track, depends whether it's really bassy, might be an intro, but generally speaking, around about there, more or less, isn't too bad. But don't expect to never have to adjust that, and don't consider that it's wrong if you do need to adjust it. It's what the control's for, so that you can go between quieter and louder sources and get that balance there before you bring the channel into the mix. If I take that away, bring that up into the mix, there you go, there's my mix levels. Perhaps a little bit hot for me if what I wanted to do on a 96 is boost a little bit of bass. My track stopped there, so what I'll do is, because I've got something on a loop, is I'll move these two tracks. There you go. Here's my other comparison. These are two tracks running from Tractor, so my input source is USB. Different signal level coming into the mixer, and already you'll notice that the audio on channel 3, if I cue it, is hot. That's kind of too hot, really. It's okay if the red lights peak a little bit, but going like that, we're getting into the territory. If I go back to show you this, we're pushing it up here. It's not clipping. It's starting to peak, and there's a difference between it starting to peak and it clipping. So what I'm going to do for that one, before I turn that up, is I'm just going to knock that back a little bit. Just bring it down. There we go. That's looking a little bit healthier for my liking. Round about there. Great. When I bring up that track into the mix, that's fine. That's nice and healthy signal. Operating nicely in my operating range. It's all going on around here. So the noise, the electronics of the mixer is down there. Nothing going to be heard. With my faders up, that's giving me a good healthy signal to send to my output. What you'll notice at this point as well is that if you can see those over here, both of my master output controls are turned down. So there's nothing going to any speakers that I've had connected to this mixer. Fine. We're talking about setting up the gain stage here. So you're making sure that the audio coming into the mixer and coming into the mix is at the right sort of levels, so that when I start combining tracks, blending music, I've got a healthy signal range, and I'm not going to damage the speakers. I'm not going to be sending distorted audio out to my speaker system. Okay, you can see these meter the input, regardless of what I've got going on here. They're constantly monitoring the level of the signal coming into the channel. That's what they're designed to do. So you can keep an eye on, as you're mixing, on where those levels are, and as you jump from one track to another, whether you just need to tweak that again a little bit. So this one, I've top that down a little bit. It's not in the mix yet, but those two are now both operating more or less within a similar range. So that if I flipped between one and the other, that one in the mix, flip that one in the mix, they would come in or into the mix and out to your speakers at roughly similar levels. The reason why we leave a little bit of headroom, this bit up here, is so that when I start to get into the mix and I start to get creative with those tracks and I start to cut the bass on that one, boost the bass on this one, those levels in here don't get driven into the red. If I show you as an example and I set those back at where they were, straight away, if I bring them both into the mix, bring the bass up on that one as well, you can see those meters there, they're now pretty well just sat in the red. It won't damage the audio on this system because we've got more headroom than the meters show you, but trust me, it's not going to sound as good as you think it might. People who say, drive it in the red, run your DJ mixers hot, that's how it sounds better, I'd be inclined to disagree with you there. You're just kind of running your audio into the top end of the system. Whereas music is dynamic, you want to hear the transients, you want to bring the mood in and out, that's the musical energies. So turn it back a little bit, give yourself the headroom and use the dynamic range in the channels. As I say, when you start getting into the mix and you add a filter onto one of those, boost it into wild, stuff like that, that's also going to add energy here. Let me show you this with a way I quite like to use the filter is down here in the low end and use it to boost bass frequencies. This is plus 6 dB here. So if I set this channel to be operating up around there, before I've done anything in the mix, as soon as I add the filter on and turn it wild, I'm just pushing all of the musical energy right up into the top of the dynamic range. It honestly, it's not going to sound as good as if you give the operating range its full travel to work with. The other thing that will happen is as you start to add different sources to the mix, and if you bring back effects into the mix, which I can do here hopefully with one of these channels. If I send from here, there you go, you'll see there I've got a return channel coming back on that one. Adding and combining all of those in the mix, it's cumulative, so every signal adds to the next one. You've got a sum in the meters. If you're pushing them all too hot, what you're going to get out of the other end isn't going to be a really loud mix. It's going to be getting towards a distorted mix. The way that you get a louder mix or a louder output is turning up your master levels and or getting a louder amplifier and a louder pair of speakers. I can see a few questions coming in, so I realise I'm prone to ramble on a little bit. Let me have a quick look through some of your questions. 96, is there now any way to see the meter reflecting the output after the master knob? So it seems to be a pre-master knob. Maxime, thanks for the question. There is not. The master meters on all of our Xone mixers are pre-master level control by design. And the reason for that is, as if you've been following my rambling, it's so that you can monitor the signal levels that you are sending to the mix. And the idea is that you want these, and you want to be aware that these aren't clipping, aren't being distorted, aren't all just up there in the red like this. That's going to sound horrible. Before you even get to the speakers, you know that audio is not really in a good place. The reason we keep it pre-master level is because with these sort of mixers, we would assume that your inputs on your loudspeaker management system or your hi-fi amp will give you some idea of what level that amplification system is receiving. So we'd expect you'll either have some meters on the amp, maybe even just a peak LED, like we have over here on some of these, to give you an idea of where you might be overdriving your audio. So these are designed so that you can monitor the signal within this system and know that it's where it wants to be within that operating range. If we were to give you post-master level metering, what you'll tend to do is have your gain stage back to front. If I can explain what I mean by back to front, is that you will end up, what we see typically is people will either maybe have that not so loud. If I can just use the one track here as an example and turn this up. What tends to happen is people will turn the master up, and then because their speakers are kind of rattling or it's all getting a bit loud in the room, they'll start to turn the gain stages or the faders down. When you do that, what you're doing with the operating range is you're pushing it down here. Okay, so just to reiterate, Maxine, they are pre-master level meters by design, and there's a good reason for that, so that you can tell the signal that you're driving to your amps is a good, healthy range. Let's have a look. Who else we got? Ambient. Evening. Is it possible today to have output not match what the master reads? I see it a lot. When you're talking about the output in terms of the mixer, I'm going to assume there, head knocker. Yes is a short answer. And if you don't have any kind of signal metering on your loudspeaker system, on your amplifiers, then as a general rule of thumb, let me see, I'm not quite sure you'll be able to see this, but if you've got a 9.6, you can put the master level at unity. I'll talk to you about unity in a second. On a 9.6, you should see around about 7 on that level. There's a little black dot on the legend. On a 96, that is essentially unity on the system. So head knocker, that setting there is as loud at the output as the meters are displaying. I hope that makes sense. So then if you want to turn up the signal without pushing it up into the red here, you turn up the master level there. And that from 7 till maximum is all adding gain onto the output there. So again, you can amplify the signal output from the mixer without distorting the input. And that's what you want to do. You don't want to distort the input. You don't want to get in that muddy, unclear, cluttered sound. It's cluttered if you've got lots of tracks in the mix. It starts to get muddy if you've got too much bass content and stuff in there. So you can keep all of that dynamic range active and clear the clarity in your signal. And you can boost the output level beyond here. Most of our mixers will give you gain on the master. Flat out isn't unity. If you want to talk specifics about any particular mixer, drop a comment in the questions. I'll go through those and I can review this for you with a different model. Obviously, I'm using the 96 because it's got quite a lot of sources I can bring into the mix and stuff like that. So the metering on the mixer is on the channels. It's post gain, post EQ. So if I turn on this one, all of that down, you can see there, nothing on that meter anymore. And again, it's by design so that when you're mixing or when you're preparing a track to mix, you can get an idea of how that track is going to be within the mix, the level it's going to be at in the mix, before you bring up the faders. And as you get familiar with it, those of you who are familiar with it probably don't even think about this sort of stuff. It's just what you do. You will see there's some signal on the 96 because these don't attenuate full kill. They're not full kill controls. These are minus 27 on the high and low mids. So there's always going to be a little bit of signal there for you to see coming in on the meter. Again, that's fine. Things often being actually louder than what the meter reads. Again, the meters read very accurately on these mixers. If it's louder, you've either turned up the master, say on a 96, beyond this unity point, or you've turned up your amps, your speakers. So the signal output on these is pretty accurate. I did a couple of checks yesterday with some of the guys in R&D. We did some scoping on some D-scope equipment, and I'm very confident about the kind of levels of the metering we've got going on here. Let's have a look. Mike, I wanted to ask if the signal return of AB adds level on top of the channels. Channels appear on the mix, LEDs at 0. My return A has level 0 2. When I add 75% of A, my mix level increases to like +3 or more. But since I'm adding 75% of the same, shouldn't there be no extra? Let me just reread that again a minute. I think the short answer to this, Mike, is yes, you will add level, especially if you're in the mix. I think if I've understood what you're saying, if I can demonstrate it, perhaps. Let's use 2 and 3 because I've got a loop running on those. You saying you want to add, you've got them both around about 0 dB. When I add like 75% of your mix level, so you're saying some of the fader travel, I'm assuming. That's where that is on the meters there. When you've got more than one track in a mix, you should expect those two to be cumulative. So this will show higher on this meter than you've got there. That's perfectly normal because you're adding the signal from the two tracks to the mix. And as I say, it's a cumulative sum. So the two together is greater. The sum is greater than the parts. And yeah, sorry, as my producer there, Mike, if you think 0 plus 0 equals 0, it's not quite. What you're confusing is unity plus unity equals 2 signals. So it's louder than unity. Let me talk about unity, perhaps, to give you a little bit of context. What do we mean by unity? We mean by unity 0 dB. So on our, what I'll do is I'll show you here with the test tone, just a little bit easier to demonstrate, I think. Let's get those out of the way. And again, over here, you can see there, that's just not quite unity. That it's showing on the LED -3. That's not necessarily exactly -3 dB. Okay, it's an indicator, and we've got 3 dB increments on that. If I cue it and adjust it a little bit, you can see there I'm now at 0 dB. And if you have a look here, for this signal, it's just slightly past 12 o'clock. Again, so if you were listening from the start and can follow my rambling, this isn't a default position for 0 unity. It's got a center detent, and we've designed the different preamp circuits so that unity is close to that position on the pots. The reason for that is because we know a lot of you are switching between line levels. A lot of you are playing CD audio, vinyl audio. You're using USB. Bear with me a minute. My record is running to the end there. All different sorts of music coming into your channels. And we know that a lot of you get frustrated by having to adjust this control from here. If you've got a particularly hot line level input, you might have that quite attenuated. If you've got, as I say earlier on, my nice 70s Al Green record, that's going to be quite quiet, and I'm going to need to push that all the way up there. On some of our mixers, that is quite a dramatic adjustment. It's fine. It's a variable control. It's what it's for. But we appreciate that can be a little bit frustrating for some of you. And if you're switching between sources on one of the channels, you'd like it to be a little bit less mad for you to adjust while you're thinking about the mix and stuff. With a digital console, we could do all of that under the hood and just make sure that a signal coming in at that point equals 0. This is analog, and we're dealing with analog inputs generally as well as digital inputs. So it's an adjustment. Unity, for intents and purposes, 0 dB there. So I've got 0 dB coming in. What that means is I am not attenuating the signal from its source, and I'm not boosting the signal from its source. It's essentially as loud as it was when it came out of whatever it was that produced it. And when I turn the faders up, unity again. So if I want to be playing audio without affecting its levels with the mixer, this is the kind of setting you're looking at. I've got unity coming in, 0 dB on the meter there. I've adjusted it accordingly, wherever that needs to be for the signal source. I turn up my fader to the full extent of the travel. That's unity. So there's nothing being added or taken away from that signal on its path through the channel to the fader out to the mix bus. Now the mix bus to output to my speakers, if I want that at unity as well, as I say on 96, we've given you a little dot, which is more or less unity. So 12 o'clock-ish on the gain, fader full up, master at 7, you're around about unity there. But again, we wouldn't suggest you need or should get too obsessed about this. And the reason for that is because I'm showing you here, illustrating with a test tone, and nobody in a club is listening to a test tone. We want to listen to some music. And once you get the music involved, as I say, it's a dynamic signal. It's moving around all the time, and it's in stereo. So it's moving from the left to the right, hopefully, a bit of delays in there, whatever it is. Some of that music is moving around the room, the space that you're listening to as well. So the dynamic signals in audio should be allowed and able to move up and down between that range. If you've got a good speaker system, you'll be able to hear those differences in level, and that's kind of what makes music what it does and what it does to us. If you have all of your level pushed up into a very narrow or predefined range, to go back here, if you push it all up into the red, like I say, a lot of people say, oh yeah, drive them in the red, they sound great, just keep all the channel meters in the red. For starters, you'll frustrate any front of house engineers who might be driving a mixer. They'll bring over the tape, they'll start telling you not to touch your faders and stuff like that, so you won't be building a good relationship with the crew for the venue, and you really won't be hearing or listening to the audio as best as it could. It's a bit of a myth to say that pushing the levels to the maximum and peaking it hard gets the best from the system. It's not true. The best way to run the systems are within the normal or nominal operating range. And as I say, in terms of before you've done anything creative in the mix, plus or minus 6 dB is a good, healthy signal and will give you the headroom, the extra level that our system has built into it to enable you to start boosting a bit of bass. I mean, I'm being very I'm exaggerating what I'm doing here just so you can see it on the meters. But as I say, if I keep that nicely at unity, more or less, bring it into the mix here, perhaps I'll enable the split Q so you can see where my master is. Let's cue that one. So there you go. That's my master here. Sorry, it's my Q here, my master level there. I can keep an eye here on the fact that the input signal is okay. I can also keep an eye on what's going out of the system here. And if you'll notice there, if I start to, I'll exaggerate it for the demonstration. If I start to boost that, there you go. This one is now starting to output a little bit of peaking. A little bit, that's fine. As I say, if it's touching, flashing occasionally like that, it's not a problem. Those transients in the mix, those little punchy bits in there, that's all fine. For it to be running into that like that, not a problem. We've got plenty of headroom in the system above here. To say our meter's peak indicator, if you look at the top of the channel strip, it's got a PK and an exclamation mark there. That's an indicator to say to you, hang on a minute, you're getting up to the top end of the level, and if you push that there and push that there all the time, it's not going to sound as good as it could. Your audience's ears are going to take a beating over the night as well, and you're going to be, sore heads and sore ears the next day. Genuinely, it's not the best way to mix. I've probably lost the thread here a little bit a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to have a little look through some of your questions. So when a 96 mixer in black? We're not going to go there. You've got skins and stuff like that if you want a black one. We've never done a black 96 or we've never done a black 92. So love all these live streams, A&H. Thank you, Tito. The guys, if you ask me questions, I can give you answers, and that will stop me rambling on like an idiot. And hopefully we can, engage with you directly. Can you connect a K2 to a Pioneer DJM 900? E minor. The K2 is a controller, MIDI controller. It does have a sound card in it. So if you wanted to use a K2 to control software like Tractor, something like that, if you've got K2 hooked up to Tractor, like I've got here on this one, and you want to use the audio within the K2, then yes, you could connect it to a DJM 900 because you would output from the sound card of the K2 on RCA cables into a line input on your DJ mixer. That would apply to any other DJ mixer. The question, if you're asking about the X-Link and the network ports, the RJ45 sockets on the back of a K2 do not connect to the RJ45 network sockets on a Pioneer mixer. They do different things for different reasons. Hiya, David. LA, you've got an SQ5. Okay, cool. That will be one for Keith, perhaps. SQ7 price, Eden, that's another one for Keith. This is a Xone Q&A here. So, as I say, whilst I'm rambling a little bit, I think we're 3 sessions into the Xone series for this year. I'm trying to cover some general topics and offer some general advice. I think Keith is a way past where I am at this stage. So possibly a little bit more coherent Q&As you're getting out of him at the moment. But the Q volume knob goes to 11. Does it make it louder Q than other mixers? Well, any of you guys who know why stuff goes up to 11 know what we've done there. Whether it's louder than other mixers or not, I guess I don't know the answer to that, Maxime. It goes up to 11 as a nod to those old school engineers who will know the Spinal Tap reference there. It is, what I can say, a very capable and loud headphone amp. So if you've got it turned up to 11, you've either got some very, very high impedance headphones, or you're going to be having some hearing problems sooner or later if you haven't already got them. 11 on our mixers on the Q bus, I would expect, if you've got your operating gain levels set right, if it's going on, where have I done here? What have I got going on now? Oh, we've got all of that boosted, haven't we? It's a little bit too hot for me. Why is it too hot for me? I've got big loud speakers, and I know my speakers can produce the sound very, very well and loudly on their own right, so I don't need to drive this too hard. I digress. This operating around here on the meters, if I cue the master, so I'm only listening to the output through my headphones, I'd be really surprised if I needed to have this Q level anywhere much more than here. It'd just be so loud in my headphones that I'd be struggling. As I say, but what we offer is quite a wide range of adjustment. And as I say, also what we know is that, you know, in some booths, you're going to have a big stack next to you for your monitor rig. That's giving you your mix output. So when you want to cue a track in particular, you do need, in some cases, to be able to turn that up quite loud, just so as you can hear it in isolation from everything else that's going on around you. Accumulation then, Mike. Yeah, it's essentially the outputs here is a sum, to use another term, engineering term that some of you may or may not be familiar with. I don't really want to get dragged into the sort of minutiae of the technicalities, because, say, either if you're looking at the A&H channels, you'll know what we're talking about, and I possibly aren't explaining it exactly as you'd like me to. Generally speaking, though, when we talk about summing, we're talking about combining sources from more than one channel. You know, we're DJs, we're mixing two tunes together. It's a little bit different from the console engineers who are combining several different mic sources from a band or a drum kit and stuff like that, and balancing a mix like that. It's a similar in principle, but in practice, we're mixing between two tracks or two or three sources. And what we want at the output is a balanced mix here, but it's a sum of all of these things. And as you add them together, they will become cumulative. So, you know, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. With dBs, it's a log. And again, I'm not going to go there, because I don't think we all need a maths lesson this afternoon. Let me run through a few more questions and keep an eye on the time, because I'm probably rambling and need to answer a few more questions. What A&H stereo device would allow professional main output gain plus 26 dBm, plus 29 dBm levels? Well, Douglas, I maybe don't understand the question in context of why it would need to. Essentially, to get, I think, with the 9.6, you've probably got about 26 dB as a maximum output. So if you turned everything up and turned it up, what you would be getting from the output is potentially around about that 26 dB. We have balanced master outputs give you plus 4 dB. And what that equates to is plus 4 dBu is 20 dB below max headroom. So that's referencing 0 on the meters is plus 4 dB at those balanced outputs, you would still have gain above that. Just to go back, if you were following earlier, with this here, master at, let me show you the master too, it's a little bit clearer to see on the camera. They're around about unity. At the output, the signal level is plus 4 dB on top of that. If you want to turn that up more, you'll go up here, and that will give you around about 24 dB, plus 24 dB on the outputs. Everywhere else, if you need to make things louder, if you want the room, the audio in the space to be louder, if you want your SPL levels higher, that's the amplification and the speaker system that handles that. This is not the mixer. The mixer isn't an amplifier of signal level. It's in that context. And again, I'll be wary of going too far down that rabbit hole, because somebody will either correct me or I'll stumble over my glossary of terms and end up confusing somebody a little bit further. But 26 dBm, if you've got a 9.6 running well, these channels here, if I bring all of those into the mix again, if I had this going on in the mix, couldn't tell you what that might sound like if I put the audio out, probably be a bit of a car crash. But if I've got that going on, take that out, that's a good signal, I'm happy with that. Throw them up there, let's add a filter to one of them, keep him high, let's get that going, maybe, and we're going to boost a bit of that. That's probably even a little bit tame for some people in a club environment. Let's get it doing that. It's a little bit better, isn't it? That's probably a little bit more like what you might see. I'd be inclined to say that's a little bit hot, that. Maybe certainly if front of house engineers might come over and see that happening, they probably turn it down for you. But if you have that there and you've got this turned all the way up, so long as your amplifiers can handle that, you're going to be in the 26 dB region. Other than that, I think I've maybe clarified a question. Perhaps I hope I've answered it. I have a question. Is there out to work two outputs, one with mic and one without the mic? Doc, hiya. I think we've had a couple of conversations on maybe support, and in one of the forums out there, I think I had a little look around and looking for a few comments and questions that hopefully we can help with. Two outputs, one with a mic and one without a mic. If you are talking about the 9.6 in particular, 92 would be the same. I think the PX5 would also offer you what we call a clean feed bus. So if you have a microphone input into the mixer and that mic source selected, one of these two channels on the 9.6, there's only one on most of the others. 9.2's got two. We designed this system so that this mic signal won't be sent to your booth outputs. It also won't go to your record output by default. The reason for that is when the mixers are designed and the environment that they're considered used most normally in is clubs. And for that type of environment, that, the club mixers, generally speaking, the guy on the mic is typically giving some announcements, some shout outs, some stuff like that. It may not be quite what you want in the mix that you're monitoring. Okay, so it doesn't go to the booth output, because if the guy with the mic is in the booth, you might get some feedback in the booth if it goes to the booth monitors. And if you're recording the mix, certainly typically when Xone came into its own and those designs were conceived, can I be frank, the guy on the mic, you didn't want him on your recording because he was probably not part of what you wanted to have in the mix. I'd say wedding DJ, something like that. Somebody giving a shout out in the booth, or the bloke who came up and went, "Oh, give me the mic, mate. Yeah, I'm going to chat to that." Blah, 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 blah. And no offense, maybe it wasn't the ideal thing for you to capture with the recording with your well-rehearsed mix. That's the that's the sort of simple answer as to why we have a clean feed system. If you are DJing with one of our mixers and the MC is part of your setup, it's part of the rehearsed thing, if you want to capture that MC in your recordings, there are a couple of different ways you can do it. You can either reconfigure the mixer permanently to disable the clean feed bus. So internally within the mixer, it can be reset. We would ask you to take that to one of our authorized service centers to have that done. We don't want to encourage you to open the mixers up any more than we need to, or any more than you would have to. And the clean feed bus is one of those. So you can take it to an authorized service center, contact one of our distributors. Your retailer hopefully could help you out with that. And if they say to you, don't know what you're on about, mate, get them to contact us and we'll tell them all about it. But that's the permanent way. So if you had a 96, you're working a 96 with an MC as part of your setup, and you do want to capture him, and or you want to listen to what he's saying, what he's chatting in the booth, you can disable the clean feed system. You could do it for one or other of those channels. So you could still have an announcement mic, which doesn't go to the booth, and you could have your vocalist's mic, which would be part of your mix signal in the booth. The slightly less permanent way, or the kind of more user-friendly way of doing it, if you like, would be typically for recording. I think this is the one we see online. People who are streaming. Doc, I don't know if this was specifically the topic we were discussing, where people are streaming and they want to give a shout out on their stream. The stream is a USB capture. Then you can route one of your master buses, and I think generally in the examples that I've given people online and that our support guys will give online for the recording purposes, is we would suggest you connect the master 2 output and use the master 2 output as your recording source input. Typically, I guess I'm going to assume the application is streaming, OBS, something like that. You're doing a cast, you can't hear the mic, or you want to hear the mic as well. What we would typically suggest to you is to connect the master 2 outputs to the line inputs, and select that line input's USB channels as your source for OBS. That's the way to get your mic into a mix, I think, sort of simply speaking. I've just been corrected by my production crew there, and the +4 dBu is +15 dBm. Again, as I said, in terms of getting into the difference between dBUs, dBm, dBV, dBFS, the only other one I'm really going to reference is dBFS, because dBu, dBV, it depends on whether you're referencing source or input impedances, whether you're talking about current or voltage, and which is why we reference generally dBu as a unloaded reference. So I've been corrected at +15 dBm. I will take that from the production team. But hopefully what I was talking about, the same applies. Again, I'm rambling and we're probably crashing the hour, so let me just whip through a few more, because there's a bunch of questions there I didn't even see going on, so bear with me a minute. Thanks for focusing on the 96 and the Xone line. Thank you, Adrian. If you do have, guys, particular questions about a particular mixer or a particular feature, drop them in the comments. When the next session comes round and we post the announcement that it's coming up, drop your questions in there. That will give me a little bit more time to review the topics that for discussion and do my homework and due diligence so that I can give you more coherent answers. Use the Xone, not Doc's back. I use the Xone 910. It works, but not the best way due to ducking. Okay. It's a slightly different question we're talking about there in terms of sounds like Doc that you are that voiceover and DJ, you want both to be captured. I think what I would suggest is review the gain stage, review the gain settings, and as you've said, you'd use I used 910. It works, but not the best way due to the ducking. So I think you were saying you're using send to get your mic back into your mix. It wouldn't be the ideal way of doing that, I don't think. A little bit confused. Perhaps what I'll do, Doc, is catch up with you on the thread we've had in off the sessions. Just get a better idea of the question that you're asking, and I'll give you a more coherent and informed particular answer to that next time. Josh O, any tips like the ones you gave last time about looping the audio from record out or jack out into a channel input for record? Josh O, that was what I was just talking about, actually. If you want to capture the mix output for USB streaming, which I think is becoming more and more typical, certainly, the way things have been recently. For this mixer, for the 96, use the audio sync out or the record out if you just want to take the music source and bring that in as a USB input. I'll perhaps review that in a little bit more specific detail because we'll be wandering off topic a bit here, and I probably need some different screenshots and stuff to show you. But if you want to capture just the audio for OBS streaming or something like that, an application that will only allow you to use USB channels 1, 2, then the short way of doing that is take record out, connect it to line in on channel 1, and select channel 1, 2 on your cast software. You can use the audio sync out instead of the record out. You might have the record outs connected to a hardware device. The audio sync out sources the same signal. If you need the mic input, the mic signal to be captured with your cast as well, use the MST2 outputs on the back. You can connect from those unbalanced to the line in. Again, bear in mind how you set your gain. Adjust it so that you've got your levels. Don't just set your mixer like that. Expect everything to be lovely. It's perfectly normal and acceptable and genuine. It's not a problem to have to adjust these up or down a little bit. Let's crack through a few more questions because time is probably running and passing fast. Not sure if you talked about the sync out yet, specifically some use cases. I think the sync out gives you an audio source. It's the mix bus output minus microphone sources. You will find quite a few bits and pieces of equipment out there that perhaps need something to sync to, BPM meters, stuff like that. Our old systems monitor the audio to get a tempo reference. So the audio sync out is another output on the rear of the mixer that you can use for stuff like that. You can feed it as an input into any other source. And we've got a few ideas here at home as to other things we might like to use that for, but I'm not here to talk to you about that just now. Let's have a look. I'll crack through a few more questions before I say goodbye. Jump on about 15 minutes ago. Don't know if you already covered this. How does the crunch on filters affect the signal levels? George, that's a great question. It will add signal level. It will add amplitude to the signal level. Sorry, I should say. The crunch, if you're not familiar with it, or if you've used it, or maybe don't quite understand the terminology, I am going to show you in another session with some spectrum metering and some monitoring so that you can sort of see what's happening at the same time rather than hearing it. Crunch adds harmonic distortion into the signal path, which, for those of you who were in at the start and me referencing running everything into the red, is kind of what that's about without running it into the red. What we're doing is we're adding nice distortion. Harmonic distortion is very pleasing to the ear. It's where you get people talking about just overdriving stuff, having a drive-in thing, pushing something to work hard is not, in electronic and audio signal terms, the same as distorting it to clipping, and it's probably worth noting that the two things, whilst they sound and quite often use the same terms, aren't the same. So harmonic distortion adds character to a sound. If you've got digital audio where it's very clean and transparent, the human ear likes a little bit more grit, if I can use that term. But as I said, in the club environment, you know when you feel the music that you kind of enjoy it more. Harmonic distortion will add something very pleasing to the ear, and/or it will start to distort the signal. And what it will do, distorting it without adding so much amplitude to the signal levels that you're going to drive the signal levels back up into here. So what it will do is it will add that kind of noise. They're very subjective terms here. You excuse me, guys. I'm struggling to pop up with the right one out of my head, but they add that kind of grit, the crunch. I mean, it's the right term actually. It sounds crunchy. It sounds a little bit crunchy. And that's quite nice on your ear. It's a different sort of crunch than the clipping, which is the signal rail, the signal in the electronic rails hitting their limits. A digital signal will clip. You get a very nasty. There's nowhere else for it to go. With the analog electronics, the audio components start to behave differently, and you can get some nice results out of that to the ear, but generally it's not really where you want to treat the electronics. So the crunch circuit is designed to add that subjective good noise, good distortion into the mix without damaging the electronics. I hope I've explained that clearly. Probably haven't. It's maybe one we'll revisit. As I say, I do plan on talking in more detail about the filter stage, show you as well as describe what happens, why it happens, why we've designed it that way, and why we think it's become pretty much standard on a lot of mixers in terms of having a filter. But that's for another day. Do you need anyone with you in the studio to make your live stream easier, Joshua? Yes, please. No, I've got somebody in the background, but we are working on that. This is still a work in progress, guys. So apologies for the rambling nature, and if it's looking a little bit like I'm doing it all on my own. I'm not quite, but we don't have a full studio production team here behind me. Where can I buy a hoodie like yours? There you go, York. Thank you. That one's for Marcus. Oh, I thought I'd wear that today. Here you go, guys. Nice Xone series hoodies. This one is decades old, I'm afraid, guys. But we hopefully will have some news on that front for you before too long. I still don't want the guy on the mic in the recording dock. That's great. Then just use your record outs. Use the MST option if I show you here for your recordings. If you're recording USB, leave that one up. Select 1112 on your USB input, and you will have the mix output nice and healthily balanced. Obviously, you've all been following my advice. It's going to be a lovely, healthy signal with no MC chatting nonsense all over it. No offense to any of the MCs out there, by the way. Take over the Tractor, please. I will be talking about Tractor again in more detail. I do plan on having a session particularly focused on setting up Tractor with our mixers, and also I'll be incorporating in one of those sessions our K2 controllers. We talk about maps, setting up and stuff like that. That may be in a couple of months' time. I was playing with a pre-post. Yeah, pre-post on the sends, if it's not apparent or you weren't quite sure, though the send 1 on the 96 is available to be pre or post the fader level. So you can send signal from a channel to typically an effects unit, but any other source if you want to, before you started moving the faders around. So however level however you're mixing on the faders here, obviously in the mix, the left-right output will change the levels of that according to what you mix, what's going on the crossfader, which channel you're bringing stuff in for. Send, just out of here, wasn't really going to be talking about sends, but the send one on the top here is pre or post fade. So you can send a signal from this channel pre-fade. You can play with that fader all day long, play with the crossfader all day long. Whatever comes out of send one here won't be affected. Pre-fade. Post-fade, hopefully that follows. You send something from that channel, that fader's down, you're not going to hear anything. It will follow whatever's happening post-fade. Send 2 on the 96 is fixed post-fade, and post-fade is typically an effects send option. Pre and post fade. Some of the design in our mixers comes from sort of our heritage of live consoles, and pre and post phase sends are used for slightly different purposes in those contexts. They are commonly applied for DJ environments, but typically we use those for effects on the DJ mixers, and more commonly a post fade send to an effects unit is what you're doing. I mean, I'm a fan of pre-fade sends, because if you've ever tried sending pre-fade send audio down a reverb unit, it sounds great. It's just there's stuff. Play around with the stuff, guys. This is the other thing I wanted to say is don't be afraid to experiment. If you're not quite sure how the stuff works, by all means ask us questions, fire something into support. Please come back to the sessions and ask me, what you need answers for. But guys, don't forget, have a play around, experiment with it. It's a creative process, DJing, and our mixers are robust enough for you to use and play. Turn stuff up, turn stuff down. Try and keep everything flat out of the red. That's not ideal, but everything else, have a play around. You'll find your own answers if you do that genuinely, and I would encourage that at every step of the way. Let's follow up off this. Yeah, Doc, we'll have a chat, I think. K2 plus DB4 question. Most K2 are not used. Is there a way to map more controls using some out or MIDI kit? Richard, I don't really know what the context is there. So if you want to fire a question, either as a follow-up comment there, I'll have a look. Or the other one is if you fire a question to our support team, support@alan-heath.com. You can do that via an email. That will open a ticket with us. Or you can go online, go to our support center, follow the links on the website, open a ticket with us there and ask your questions. You can see the links there in the chat. We'll get back to you. We'll answer your questions. We can maybe get into a little bit more detail. And certainly if you're answering the sort of questions that we think a lot of other users would be interested in hearing the answers to, it's the kind of thing that I'll cover for you in a future session. At this point, probably what I'm going to do now is love you and leave you, because we've crashed the hour. My vinyl there is crashing into its label. I could do with a little drink of water. And you've probably heard enough from me by now as well. Next time, I've got a feeling Jack might be back from America. If not, it'll be Keith. Not quite sure when Alex is going to come back and do another session for us, or if he is. But we will all be back. I'm Al, product specialist here at HQ. Generally, I cover the DJ ranges. And if you see me here, that's what we're talking about. The other guys will be in and out doing the live sessions. Some of our sales specialists and the guys who are out about in the world, Val, Martine, they might pop up now and then as well. But generally, the regular Q&A sessions will be myself, Keith, who you all know and love, Jack, who I hope you all know and love, and I'm fairly sure Alex is going to be popping up now and again as well. So, listen, there's one more here. Can you ask about Avantis? Kestutis. Yes, you can ask about Avantis, but don't ask me, because if it hasn't got a crossfader on it, I'm not the guy to be asking. That's our sort of short question. I know we're streaming this out on the Alan and Heath channel, so I realise there's a lot of you guys out there who are going, "What is he going on about? What's mixed DJ? What's going on?" Because the Alan and Heath channels are focused on our live consoles, on the D Live systems, the Zs, the wider what we call MI or Pro, the music mixing, the band mixing type hardware. What we wanted to do after the last couple of years is just talk to you a little bit more about the DJ stuff. We haven't done that for a long time. So when you see me here rambling on, we're rambling on for the DJs. But yes, you can ask about Avantis, of course. Questions you put into the comments here will get fed back to the other team, and one of those guys will get back to you. Is there going to be a Xone K2 update, a newer controller? I think I'll end with this point. We've got lots of ideas. We've got lots of plans. The Q&A sessions at the moment are designed to talk about our current products and the current features of those. And the features of those current products, and or stuff in the manual that you don't understand, or stuff on the mixer that's like, I don't get that. Why is it doing that? There'd be the sorts of things where we might see a ticket come in and say, this is a problem. And we've looked at it and gone, it's not a problem with the mixer. There's maybe a little bit of confusion in how it's being used and stuff like that. So those are the ideas for the Q&A. Ask us questions that you haven't been able to get your head around, or that you want us to give you an answer to. New products. Yeah, there'll be new products. Don't worry about that. But there's a time and a place for that. And the product launches we're looking forward to very much. I think at that point, I'm going to love you and leave you guys. And see you in a month's time.